right, well, welcome to Franklin High School for tonight's community forum. Appreciate Dr. Clendening having this vision to keep these community forums going. This is the third of this type of forum that we've done, this format, and we appreciate everybody being here tonight. The issues that we're talking about tonight are revolve around cyber safety and those issues affecting our kids, and in particular the legal side of those issues. And so the format tonight, we really want it to be interactive with you as parents. And so for that, we have a panel here, and I'm just going to allow each person to introduce themselves and their job and their role here tonight to function. So if I can start with Carrie.
Thank you. I'm Carrie Miles. I work at the Johnson County Prosecutor's Office. I'm a deputy prosecutor. I do sex and child-related crimes and domestic violence crimes.
I'm Alex Hamner. I'm also a deputy prosecutor. I handle all of the juvenile cases, including the sex crimes and anything else that juveniles commit.
Ryan Bland, Johnson County Prosecutor's Office as well, deputy prosecutor. I do the adult sex crimes as well as crimes involving children, battery, all the way up to sex crimes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Clendening, Superintendent of Franklin Schools.
Hello, Tim O'Sullivan, Chief of Police.
Sergeant Brian Oliver, work for Franklin PD, but I'm also the full-time school resource officer for Franklin Schools.
All right. Thank you, guests. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. For us, and when we think about cybersecurity and safety, for us as adults, first thing that comes to my mind is really, that theft identity or identity theft and those types of issues for me and us as adults. But for our kids, it's a little bit different. There's still a little bit of theft there, but more on the personal side, and it's about really stealing their innocence far too early, probably, and so the things that we're seeing for our students, our kids, it's happening at a younger age. They're all everybody has access to electronic devices now, and so what are those issues that we're seeing from the school side and law enforcement and prosecutors side? So we really appreciate you being here tonight. So what are the topics? What are we talking about? Well, the three topics that we'd like to cover, but again, if there are more that you would like to cover, feel free to just raise your hand. Again, this format, just raise your hand. We'll come to you. We'll ask you to just stand up, state your name, and then make a comment, question. So we really want this to be interactive. But these are the topics that we're going to talk about: school threats, violent threats against our school and against students, cyberbullying, and then sexting, and then under that, really the dating violence and child pornography that can go along with that. So I guess I'd throw it to the panel first, and Dr. Clendening, if you wouldn't mind starting. When we talk about threats, what are we seeing from the school side? What kind of threats have we seen or other school districts faced with right now?
I think the ones that we're seeing right now come in two dimensions. One is through the email, where someone will email a threat out to either another student, or in a recent case where we worked with Chief O'Sullivan, there's an email to a faculty member that declared something and then caused a lot of quick action and immediate response. So that's one of the things we're seeing. The other dimension is obviously on social media. What's taking place when the kids think that adults aren't around, and then it may happen away from school, but then all of a sudden it gets brought to school, either by kids sharing information or showing things and things like that. So that's what we're seeing in terms of threats. I will say that we've had a very proactive approach in threats. We're trying to reach out to parents. One of the things that happened two semesters ago, where we had a student have some graffiti on the restroom. We kind of waited to respond, because at the time we thought, was it significant? Was it someone joking around, if you will, if that can be a joke or not for a student? But then a couple of days later, We actually had a kid text a threat to his friend, and I actually talked to Ms. Miles about that at that time, about what was going on. And so we at that point made a decision. We're going to notify parents immediately. If something comes up, we'll give mom and dad a chance to make the final call. And that's what happened this semester, where we had finals going on. We immediately notified parents once we had the response and the threat made to us. And we told mom and dad we thought it was a safe environment to come to school, but let them make the final call, because they are the best teacher. They are the ones that should control. And they're the ones that should also pick up the cell phone and look inside your kid's phone. They're the ones that are going to be the best block, safeguard, anything that can take place. So those are the threats that we're seeing right now and kind of how we're responding.
Okay. And another school that faced something similar but on a much grander scale was Plainfield. And I know we can't speak of that, those details. I don't know if that investigation is still ongoing. I know it was a long one. There's reasons for that.
It is still ongoing. I talked to the superintendent recently, and the attorneys may have more information at this time, but they're still investigating that. And the whole sextortion, which I'm sure we're going to get into hopefully a little bit about what's occurring and how people blanket emails and responses to get things to trigger and happen, was one of the things that took place in Plainfield, and how the school had to respond.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments from anybody else on school threats, violent threats? Anybody from the prosecutor's office? How have you been dealing with those when they come to your office from a threat? We don't know who it was. It may be an email. What happens then when it gets turned over to law enforcement, and then maybe it's even a question for them first. What happens next after we don't know who the email came from? What's next? How do we continue that investigation?
I'll speak to that if I may. First of all, we have a good collaborative working relationship with the schools, because if the schools are safe, that's when you have the best learning environment. So we get an email, let's say a threat or a texting threat, and they immediately call us, and we have to determine if that threat was credible or not. And usually to determine if it's credible, we have to look and see usually 3 different factors, the most being, do they have the ability to carry out the threat? We'll usually get our investigators together. They'll try to identify the suspect. We'll work together with the school administration as far as getting out information to parents once we feel that it's safe to do so. And then we'll make a determination whether the school stays open or not. When we identify a suspect, that's when they could be facing intimidation or other charges, and we'll forward it on to the prosecutor's office for review. And then they can also face sanctions through the school as far as punishment.
Okay.
Sure.
Follow up on that.
So, as the prosecutor handles the juvenile crimes, most of the stuff that happens in the high schools, like these types of threats, I handle those. And I've had a few of the cases they're talking about from Franklin, as well as from other schools. And it's not uncommon for kids, usually to say something stupid on social media, like they want to burn down their school, or they want to blow it up, or something that they might not even consider to be a threat. And yet the school has to respond to it as such. And the police get involved, and the next thing you know, the kids are trying to figure out what happened or where they went wrong because they said something stupid, or because they were, quite frankly, I think one of them, the kid was trying to mess around with his other friends, and ended up becoming broadcast to the entire school because somebody else saw it and was very concerned about it, as well they should have been. So one of the takeaways I think would be for parents to talk to your kids about this, make sure they understand that what they put on social media, other people are going to see. What they might think is a joke, very often is not going to be interpreted as a joke, because we just can't take that risk. Unfortunately, we have to assume the worst just to make sure that your kids stay safe. So we'll often have children and juveniles making jokes about things that are dangerous or threatening, and even though they think it's a joke, it's not always interpreted that way by the people who hear it or see it. So when it comes to our office, we have to determine a lot of different factors to see if we go forward with charges or not. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. But those are things that we do consider, is who they're trying to broadcast it to, the intent behind it, if they're actually trying to get their school closed down, or if they were just doing a nonsensical act. So if that makes any sense, that's the kind of type of stuff we look at, the things we try to determine before we pursue charges on that. But from the school's perspective and from the officer's perspective, they have to take it as a threat. I mean, just for the safety of your kids and for everybody that works here.
Okay, thank you. And actually, to follow up, one of our mottos for safety for the school district is we try to ingrain this into all students is if you see something, say something. And so while a couple kids might think they were joking around, somebody else was not involved in that joke and they saw it, we want them to come forward and say, hey, I saw this text or I heard them talking about those things. And a lot of times that's how it will get blown out of proportion in those kids' eyes. But as long as our kids know that motto is out there and that's what we're teaching them, we want that. That's a good thing. We want them to, if you see something, say something. So thank you for that. Next up is cyberbullying. That's the other topic that we'll discuss. And real quickly, this is the definition of bullying. And so when we talk about cyberbullying, this is the state Indiana code for what bullying is. It's an overt, unwanted, repeated act or gesture, including verbal or written communication or images transmitted in any manner, including digitally or electronically. So right there, that encompasses cyberbullying, okay? So, and then it goes on to define, if it was intent to harass, ridicule, humiliate, intimidate, harm the targeted student, or create the targeted student in an objectively hostile school environment, okay? So the actual definition of bullying has taken into consideration the cyberbullying piece, okay? Are there any, we've got some parents in the audience. Show of hands, how many people think bullying is a big issue in our schools? Just show of hands. Do you think it's more, where do you see it as when it's coming from cyberbullying or just the daily on the bus bullying acts going on? Do you think it's more prevalent either way? Are you seeing things on texting electronically? And this is a question for the panel too. Which way is it going now for students? Are we still seeing the bullying just out on the playgrounds, or is it more so electronically?
I can say bullying is a lot easier if it's electronically because you don't have to face them. And so you'll see an uptick in that, a little bit of an increase in that because especially these kids are smart and I haven't thought about being when it comes to all these different apps. They can use some that are hidden and never be found. So they can say some very mean, cruel, and brave things if they don't have to face them. Mm-hmm. And so I see that.
And bullying, from the school standpoint, we have policies in place that we will deal with it, but we first have to identify it as bullying, right? And follow that definition. So a lot of times teasing, if it's done once, remember it has to be overt, unwanted, and repeated. If it's done once, does that really fall into that category of bullying? It's tough, right? And so it's an issue that we're dealing with. So I guess for the parents, and I'm a parent as well, I've got a 7th grade student and a 4th grade student. It's about educating, it's about going in, again, Dr. Clendenning talked about it, going in, checking their text messages if they have a phone or any other electronic device, seeing what they're sending out. Are they the bully, or are they getting bullied? It goes both ways, okay? So it's about checking those devices. Any other comments on cyberbullying?
The one thing I would add is that I think that if they do bullying in school, it's a whole lot easier to catch. Because you're seeing 2 or 3 kids acting up and picking on somebody. In the social context of social media, it is so difficult for us. We get to hear a lot about it, where a kid will come and tell the teacher, the guidance counselor, principal, someone said something about me or whatever. But it's so difficult because, we don't have the ability to just go, give me your phone. We can talk about what's a search and what's not a search, but I think we probably have more of an uptick if it's on the cyber side than the actual physical side. Because on the physical side, it's easy. We can deal with the kids. They know what we're doing in terms of consequences. It's the social media side, it's the Facebook side that's causing a lot more stress for our students.
And so when you talk about that search of an electronic device, let's talk about that a little bit. If we're investigating a bullying, somebody accused another student or accused somebody of bullying them, like by texting or whatever means, what can we do? What are we allowed to do from a search and seizure standpoint of that electronic device? And then on the legal side, law enforcement, prosecution, what can we do?
We have a lot of freedoms inside the walls of school that don't take place outside. If we just have a reason to believe something's on there, we can ask for that. We don't have the ability to go in and go through everything on the text message, but we can ask the student if something took place. They said yes, we can ask to see their phone. We can search their locker and we can take the phone and confiscate it. But we don't have the ability to search it. We don't have the ability to go through and say, hey, I didn't know all that stuff was going on. There's a Supreme Court case, TLO talked about search and seizure that schools could do and what's responsible. But from the standpoint of the schools, if we hear about it, we can definitely search and capture that. Now, what we can't do then is once we start going over the situations, if we see something bad, we talked about this just the other day, if we see something that's inappropriate, sexting or whatever, that's where our administrators are going to stop. At that point in time, we're going to contact the police, we're going to contact the prosecutor's office, and we may contact DCS. One of the things that we're responsible is to either contact police or child services. It really is an or. We've talked about our next steps, and I think with Officer Oliver here, if he's serving as that role of police officer, we're going to respond to him, and that's going to get the legal side kicked in. At that point in time, school's going to step away. We're not going to continue our investigation. It's not going to be our place to do the work. As far as contacting mom and dad, if they're underage, we'll contact mom and dad and say the police are going to talk to them. At that point in time, if they think it's going to be evidence, they can talk about their role and then how it gets down to the prosecutor's office.
Basically, once we step in, we create our investigation, and like you said, we're bound by the laws of the Fourth Amendment under search and seizure. So at that point, we may collect the phone from the student and secure it as evidence, and then we would have to obtain a search warrant from the prosecutor's office if they deemed necessary to allow us to look into that aspect. At that point, that's where we would get our investigators involved and allow them to dive a little deeper into the electronic evidence collecting and that such. But back on the cyberbullying aspect of it, when we were little, of course, it was on the playground picking and making fun of each other. Now the kids can't get away from it. The cyberbullying's going on all the time. It's surrounding them. They go home, they don't get a break from it. They look online. Kids are still making comments about them back and forth. So I would say, in response to your question, it is more prevalent cyber than it is face-to-face bullying. So.
And going back to what Dr. Clendening said, it's more difficult for us as school officials to manage because it is out there on social media, electronically, whatever the medium may be. And so that's where we would need the parents' help, right? And that's where we have to work together, monitoring what your students are doing, and checking in on those electronic devices. So, you guys have anything to add on the actual process by which things would come around to you guys?
So as far as the bullying goes, there's not a bullying crime. Well, I mean,
right.
it constitutes a bunch of different crimes for us. Batteries if it's physical, intimidation usually if it's online or through text messages, things like that, harassment, stalking, those kinds of things are all, I think fall into that definition of bullying. As far as we're concerned, those are going to be a whole bunch of different crimes. There's not just a specific bullying crime. That being said, as far as when we get involved with, as they were talking about, search warrants and things like that, and getting into kids' phones, we get involved typically when they find something that, child pornography, pictures of other kids naked, things like that, threatening messages, pictures of guns, stuff that they deem to be threatening to the welfare of the child or that might be violating a crime. That'll come to us. If we get a search warrant signed off by a judge, we can look at their phone and go through that route. If it's on a Chromebook or something that's provided by the school can just look into it immediately. They don't need permission from a court to be able to do that. But if it's their own, if it's the kid's personal property or typically your personal property because you're giving it to the kids, they have to get a warrant for that kind of stuff to start looking into there. If it's against, the wishes of the child or the parent, whoever actually owns the property. That being said, very often, and this is good for us and good for the overall outcome typically, most students are very forthcoming with what they have or what's going on. My experience has been that a lot of kids don't realize that it's as bad as it actually is with what they're doing. With, like we were talking about, with the intimidation stuff, the threats, obviously they know that it's wrong. They don't always understand that it's criminal. And so they'll turn it over to the school. We get involved. The juvenile perspective with juvenile crimes is rehabilitation. I know lots of times people don't want to get involved with our office because they're afraid that we're just out looking to punish kids. And there's a component of that, sure, if we need to change behavior. But ultimately, we're trying to get the kids to change their behavior so that they can grow into productive people. It's different than the adult world where if that's a component of it, we're also looking to lock them away. That's not usually what we're trying to do with the kids. So we've had a lot of cases where kids are engaging in some of the stuff we're going to talk about later with the sexting and things like that. And we try to teach them, sometimes against their wishes, forcefully, with different motivating things we can do, but to help them to stop doing what they're doing. And if they don't, then we have no other option but to lock them up or go from that route. But we'll get to that in a minute. Sorry.
Any questions, comments? Yep.
Are kids allowed to carry phones anywhere within the school at any time?
Yeah, at the high school, they're allowed to carry their phones, and it's up to the discretion of the teacher in the classroom. And then in the unstructured places of the hallway, cafeteria, the kids can have them out. Middle school, they're not supposed to have them out. We all know that if you go to lunch, they're going to be out and about, and they're going to see it. But that's what we're doing right now from grades 7 through 12. The phone is actually a great resource for our students. We need to make sure that as we educate, it's not all bad. There's actually many, many great things about the phone, about the technology, about the Chromebooks. We just need to make sure that as we're working in the domain of education, that we're educating both for the positive and also to stay away from the dark side, if you will, so that the kids aren't doing that. So that's what I want to make sure that moms and dads really hear, that we're not going to be the police of your child's phone. The Franklin PD is not going to be the police of the phone when they're here. We don't have that time, that responsibility. That's your responsibility. And we can take the phone away, but it's also going to cause a lot more chaos, a lot of stress, because teachers are doing things in the classrooms with social media opportunities, with technology, that's making a huge difference in learning. We want to make sure that that continues.
Good. Thanks for the question. Anybody else? Robin, do we have any other questions coming in?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, there was a good chance to segue into our next topic, and that is of sexting. And let's watch a little video here. See if
That makes me nervous,
this will help
Imagine
explain
a
the
self-respecting
situation.
teen would bear it all on a cell phone photo, but 1 in 5 Americans has already done it.
It is a problem.
Right here.
It's a big problem. People, they send sexy text messages more than people think they do.
Some youngsters consider sexting a form of high-tech flirting, but the intimate messages rarely stay private.
I'm not gonna lie, there's so many people I know that have come to me saying, oh, I showed this and this person and now everybody knows, and now I'm known as the school slut.
In the Spokane School District, children as young as 6th graders have been caught sexting nude photos of themselves. Something done as a lark can leave a long-lasting impact.
Feelings are hurt, labels are placed on students that their pictures have been seen by others. It's a real devastating experience.
While most sexting pictures are born of young love, other students have found covertly taken photos can socially cripple their enemies.
I'm aware of a case when kids take pictures of schoolmates in gym class in the locker room and then distribute them. And that leads not just to child pornography, but that becomes harassment.
Chuck Haley is a sex crimes detective for the Spokane Sheriff's Office who's picked up this dozen sexting cases since the beginning of the year. Because the images on these cell phones meet the legal definition of child pornography, Haley has to get a search warrant before he views what's inside.
In this particular case, a student took a picture of their genitalia with a camera cell phone, standard phone, sent it to another student who was upset by what they saw. They in turn sent it to a third student, and who in turn turned it into the school resource officer who gave it to me.
With the help of a digital forensic specialist, Haley is able to unlock the phones and make copies of the photos and messages inside, evidence of what could be crimes.
Once you take the picture, you're now guilty of possession. Then when you send that text message out, that picture out, now you're guilty of distribution.
I just don't think that the kids know that yet, that it's really against the law. I just think it's going to be funny and that it's cool that they have naked pictures on their phone.
Teens say there are a couple of reasons why sexting has become so popular, why girls are taking pictures of themselves.
I think that it satisfies guys, because then they don't have to actually give them sex. They can just show them what they would get from them. But by the time that all rolls around, then they break up. So they don't really ever have to have sex with them. They just showed them.
Teens are showing themselves to even larger audiences on social networks.
Just recently, as last month, 90,000 registered sex offenders were taken off of MySpace page when they were determined that they were out there, trolling around looking for kids.
Experts warn sexting photos can make your child stand out in a sea of cyber faces.
Not only will they become a target, but there's escalated sexting that can occur, which may include stalking, luring, and even possibly assault.
Do you think this is dangerous?
Yes.
How come?
Because you could get raped. People could just show their friends, and then their friends could be like, wow, I really want that, and then they will rape you.
And that's why detectives and educators say it's time for parents to invade their kids' privacy.
Be a parent. Look at their cell phone. Hey, I want to see your cell phone. I want to see the pictures that are on it. I want to look at your text messages.
Parents need to take a look at their kids' cell phones, what's being sent, look at their face page, see what's online.
And don't warn them if you're going to do it. Just walk in and say, I want to see it.
I'm your mom, and I have the duty as your mom to make sure that you're safe.
All right. I chose that video for a couple reasons. What's the first thing that jumped out at you when you were watching that? Anybody? Anyone out there? First thing that jumped out at you?
The kid who got the picture sent to them and then was concerned and then sent it to another kid ends up kind of in trouble for two different reasons.
Yeah. We're seeing that, right? Still happening? Anybody else? Go ahead.
I heard it over here. I think the thing that jumped out was those were flip phones.
Yeah.
Clearly this video is a little dated. It also indicated MySpace, dating it a little bit more, as that's not a site that's used as often, which should concern us more because the technology we have now is even simpler to abuse than the technology you just saw from may have even been a decade ago.
2009 is when that report came out. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very good point. Yeah.
My bigger fear is Snapchat.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter got a phone less than 6 months ago. Facebook and Instagram to me are easy to regulate. But Snapchat isn't. And it's all easy to say, well, you can't have it. all our friends have it. And that's, and I feel like we're pretty prudish at our house. I mean, we were kind of on the last of the train, but let her have stuff. So that's my bigger fear is the apps that go away and you can't. How do I get into those and say who just sent what and what do they contain?
Yeah.
And just so you know, we all know kids are mainly smarter than we are when it comes to technology, especially me. Snapchat really doesn't just disappear like all the kids think it does. I think kids are starting to figure that out, but that's why it became popular, because they thought they could send it and it would just go away. Someone would just see it for a second. That's not accurate anymore.
That's good enough. That's where I feel like
As much as you're concerned with Snapchat, and she kind of made your fears disappear a little bit, there are other apps that are simply replacing those. And some of them that we've found, for instance, there's one called Calculator Plus, and it looks like specifically the iPhone, it looks like the iPhone calculator. The difference is if you put in the password on those keys, it takes you into the app that is a hidden vault for videos and pictures and texting that you as a parent, you're going to look at it and I can do all my functions from algebra class on this. And they'll prove it, they can. But if they put in that special code, it's going to go straight to something that you won't know. And some of the things that I try or I want parents to understand, we are their parents, we're not their friends. You should be looking at their phones. If you see a questionable app or you notice that they've got 6 calculators on their phone, clearly something is wrong with that. Ask them about it. If you look at the name of an app and you don't know what it is, and they just, it's just a calculator, Google it. It's not that hard. It's going to come up. You're going to find a brief explanation of what that app is, and then you have more ammunition to go to your children and say, what is this? Why do you have it? I know what it does. Open it. And then you'll be able to see what's there. And it was mentioned previously, as parents, we are the first line of defense. And we need to be that first line of defense.
Is there anything out there for parents to monitor their children's devices? And there's so many concerns in different areas, but, the problem is usually it's they don't know where to look or what to look for. Is there something that's out there that's available that can help parents?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And there are a lot of resources out there. I know at the end of this slideshow, and we'll get there real quickly here. At the end of this slideshow, we do have some resources for you. There's 2 websites there, ICAC and Department of Homeland Security, and then we also have some pamphlets in the back of the room that are a resource on where to go. I actually took a question, and this is probably a good time to follow up with that. We took a question from somebody that sent this in. It may have came from one of you. For common apps our children use, how do we set the security settings to make them as safe as possible? Example, for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, can you show parents how to check the security settings so the predators cannot search for them or send requests? Well, for us, on the school side, just so you know, and Matt Sprout is our director of IT, we block all social media here at the school. They can't access it. However, what you can do is and it's very simple, Matt showed me how to do it just a little bit ago. Basically, the answer to that question is, and this kind of follows up, tags along with yours, just search Google, type in whatever app it is, whatever social media site it is, and just ask for those safety guidelines. And so I went to Google, typed in Facebook safety guidelines, and that's what it sent you to. So Twitter will have that same thing, Instagram, all these things, and they have their safety guidelines up there, and then it's a parent resource for you to follow through there. Okay, does that help? Okay. All right.
As just an aside to that, these websites, these guidelines, most of these companies do create these for the safety of our children in mind. A lot of these apps, and Facebook is an example, you have to be 13 years old to use it. Well, Facebook doesn't monitor that. You get on there and you put a birth date of 1950, they're going to think you're 77 years old, and you get on Facebook, you could be 10. as a parent, if you have questions or concerns about an app, do exactly what was just indicated. Get on Google, look for the safety. If there are no safety guidelines, your best resource, your best comment to your kids are, give me your phone, that app is deleted. And periodically check their phones. If there's apps on there that don't have safety guidelines, they don't need those apps. Those apps are going to lead to trouble.
And one thing I might also add is if you're a Verizon user, and I'm sure some of the others, you can go inside and set parameters for your kid's phone number. I have 4 boys, ages 22 to 16, and the 16, 18-year-old are still giving me grief because we went in and put times where they cannot use their phone after hours. And we also get a list of most frequent phone numbers. Well, it's pretty easy to go to their buddies and say, hey, I know your phone number, but who's this new phone number that's coming up after hours? So, Verizon and I'm sure Sprint, AT&T are doing the same thing, but I know Verizon is helping parents. So I would encourage everybody for a small fee, I think it's $3, to go in and put that on your phone, and you as a parent get notified, because my wife and I get the text message say, hey, Ryan was on his phone after this time. It's like, hey, Ryan, who are you talking to? And they don't like it, but I'll tell you what, it at least triggers us to have that conversation.
Alicia, you made a point. Facebook, Twitter, that's kind of easy, right? That to monitor somewhat.
Compared to some, yes.
And I read this the other day, I forget where it was, but kids aren't necessarily on Facebook anymore, right?
No, it's
Twitter is kind of going away a little bit. It is. I mean, they're still using it, but Facebook, why do you think that is? What?
That's where parents are.
Because that's where we are.
Grandma's
right?
on Facebook.
They don't want to be on Facebook with grandma, right?
By the way, I made my child friend, Grandma. Grandma sees it. Yeah,
So what does that say to us? If they don't want to be there because we are, then let's go and infiltrate where they are, right? I did a little experiment with my son, 7th grader. He's on Instagram. And so I created an Instagram account and sent him a friend request. Made up some bogus name. He allowed me in. We had a little chat that night, right? And so those are the types of things that we have to do as parents to get in there and stay in there. Yep.
I also recommend most apps these days, they allow you to connect from multiple devices. So if you look at your child's phone and you see that they're on an app, hand them your phone and say, log me in. And you can go in anytime and see anything they're doing because you're with them.
Yeah, because most of the time, we're the ones paying for their phone, right? So it's our account most of the time. Right. Even though, yeah.
In line with that right there, I know I'm an Apple guy. I have Apple products, so everything I buy for my children is also Apple. And if you share your family account, anytime they download an app, it's going to show up on my phone as well. There's no way for them to avoid that. So if I find a new app on my phone, I know they've downloaded it. I know, okay, I need to figure out what this app is. And I just ask them, why did you download this? What's the purpose of the app? And that way you can also keep in contact or keep in touch with what it is they're doing.
You can also set it on kind of like what Dr. Clinton was talking about on your iPhones. You can go into your settings and set it that anytime any of the numbers connected to your account get a text, a phone call, or anything else, it'll come to your phone. So you get a lot of extra stuff that you don't necessarily look at that any of this work.
I think there's a texting app too that anytime like my son gets a text, I get a text. Like I see everybody he calls and everybody that calls him or tries to FaceTime him because of the whole iCloud thing sometimes is super annoying. And I also go in into you can go in settings and turn on restrictions and for like Safari, for anything, for the internet, everything in there, you can turn restrictions on and you set the password to get into the restriction so they don't know the password to that. So you can completely restrict some of their things that way.
Just a word of warning on that. My son's 13 years old. He has restrictions on his phone. He was 12 at the time, actually. It's an iPod. And he came up to me. I have it restricted, so he can't download apps. He has to come to me to get them downloaded. So he came to me one day, and he asked me to download an app for him. So I took the phone, I put in the code, and I downloaded it and gave it back to him. Well, a few weeks later, I noticed some things on the phone that I hadn't put there. And I remember that they were not there before. What he had done when he gave me the phone was he cleaned off the screen. And he told me this when I asked. He wasn't trying to hide it from me. Cleaned off the screen, gave me the phone with no fingerprints on it, and said, "Can you download that app for me?" Well, sure, it was for school. He had a good reason. So I typed in my code. At the time, it was only the 4 code. Didn't take him long to crack my code. There were 4 fingerprints. He saw where it was. He cracked the code. He got into the phone. So we have to be careful. Kids are smart. You know, I'm not. I wasn't looking when I took it. I didn't look and say, "Oh, well, there's only 4 fingerprints." The key here to all of this is communication. You have to be able to communicate with your kids.
Very good. Okay. Going back to that video we watched, there was a lot of good content in there, right? And you know, this whole topic of sexting and what it can turn into. It starts out as boyfriend girlfriend, usually.
Not
you know,
usually.
not that they think it's innocent and sending the pictures back and forth, and then all sorts of things can happen, right? And it turns into so much more. This next slide, and I've linked out up there at the top in the news. This is a report out of Utah. The school, they did a study back, I think it was about the same time, 8 or 9 years ago, but then they went back since then and studied it and looked at how many more instances do they have of sexting and things like that. So within that report were some storylines of kids sending pics and sexting, but then child predators getting a hold of that, those text messages and those things that were out on the internet. This is an excerpt from that, and it says, they talked as friends, and this is a guy, a 40-year-old, posed as a teenager and befriended a girl, and so when they say they, that's who they're talking about, this 40-year-old at the time posing. So they talked as friends, and he started texting naughtier things, and she played along. The girl told police in court documents. The girl admitted to sending photos of herself in underwear and bra at Jacob's request. Jacob was that 40-year-old in her Snapchat account. The two later met at a park in South Jordan where the teen was raped. The charges state sexting teens seems to be a huge problem, and one that people just don't understand the potential problems that can occur out of that. So 9 years ago, sexting was a problem. It's not going away, and it can become so much more than just the mental anguish that the kids may get from being teased about their photo by friends who saw it. It can turn into a lot worse, and this is just one example. So, from that, going back to the message there from Ryan, checking your phone. We want to check their apps and see. We always think, are they receiving things? What are they getting? Well, what are they sending out to? We need to be cognizant of that. Check your child's electronic devices frequently. And it's when we say electronic device, they can, Nintendo and Xbox, all that's on Wi-Fi now. They can be gaming with somebody in another country, and then they're child predators accessing those as well. You guys have anything to add to those? Anything along those lines that you guys have seen that is kind of out of the ordinary that people wouldn't normally think of when we're thinking of electronic devices? We have the Xbox, that kind of thing. But
No.
Okay.
Bill, I do want to go back to say, I think kids today don't see the seriousness of sending a picture. We heard a little bit about the Plainfield situation, and in talking to the Department of Justice who did a presentation to superintendents, the expert commented that the kids aren't afraid to send the pictures right now. It's like, I'm sending a picture. And they don't realize then that who's going to get it. The expert even called it I think the 5-second flash or something is kind of the term that's being used, and she gave the story of this girl gave the 5-second flash to her boyfriend, said, "Oh, I won't share it with anybody. I won't share it with anybody." You can kind of know what's going to happen to the end of the story. And only just share it, puts it on YouTube, it goes out. Well, it gets to a pedophile computer, and when they go to arrest the pedophile, this girl's picture's on here, and then they trace it back, and they have to go to the school to tell the girl that her picture was found on this pedophile's computer, and it all started because her boyfriend said, "Oh please," and it probably wasn't her boyfriend. I wasn't curious. It's just like, "Hey, what's the big deal?" So I just want to tell kids it is a big deal. You know, you're thinking about a job. You want to be a prosecutor sometime in your life, and you want to get an internship. If you thought this will be funny when I was in high school or college to do this, and they start looking for those things, you may not get that internship. You may not get a job ever that you really wanted because of something that you did. I can tell you from the school side, we're checking social media for teachers, prospective applicants. So we need to make sure that we don't get so lax. And no matter what Hollywood wants us to think, that it's okay to dress very scantily or whatever, it's not okay. We live in a world where we need to have high regard for ourselves and have high regard for kids. And words do hurt. Words hurt a lot. So I don't know, you guys have any comments about the sexting or extortion that goes on with that?
I think he's right that kids today do not see sending naked pictures as a big deal. We've all heard kids say, "My face wasn't in it." They're desensitized, I think, to it. So I'm 46. When I was a kid, you know, it was maybe you found a magazine somewhere, you know. Now it's available easily and everywhere. And so I think when it comes to their own bodies, they just do not see it as a big deal. Then it becomes a big deal and it's too late.
I feel guilty as a parent, though, because I think as a society, we have become a picture. I mean, I think of all the pictures I viewed this week on Facebook of people on the beach. And that's great. I certainly take many, many pictures. But I think we've taught kids that, I mean, everything is now videoed and pictured and photographed. And so, and the selfies and that whole like narcissism of, oh, my hair looks great today, so I'm going to put a new profile pic up so everybody thinks they look great. And as an adult, I feel like we've sent a bad message, not intentionally, obviously, but I'm a little nervous that that's not going to get better until we set a better example. I mean, and I think it's beyond the magazines. You know, obviously, I think there's always an issue of, you know, making women feel bad about their bodies or whatever. But just as a family, the camera's always there. And when does it become, you know, no, you can't take a picture twirling around in your, you know, at what age do I look at my 5-year-old who's really cute in her ballerina dress and twirls in her underwear show, and now all of a sudden you feel like you set a precedent for child pornography. It just stinks.
You know, and that excerpt that I read there, I mean, that goes towards worst case scenario from a parent's point of view about the welfare of our kids or safety of our physical harm, right? But there's another side to that, and it goes into child pornography, not necessarily from the 40-year-old that's out there, the child predator, but what about when it's student to student? What are the legal ramifications between student to student at the high school level? You know, talk about age limits, things like that. When it's child pornography, what's that legal definition around that? You guys share that with us?
So, it's a lot of the cases that I handle are typically kids who are sending pictures of themselves to somebody else. Usually it gets to our attention when they go past that and send it to other people as well. Most of the cases I get are pictures from a girl who sent a picture to a boy who decided to send it to all of his buddies. That's the majority of them. Sometimes it's a girl who just sends it to everybody, and she has a bunch of friends and she just sends it out. It's not as common that I get pictures from guys that are sent to girls. It's usually the reverse. That being the case, there's two separate crimes that I typically handle on those. One is, I believe the term for it is indecent display by youth. It's when a juvenile sends a picture to a boyfriend or a girlfriend and they're within 4 years of each other, both under the age of 18. And that's a misdemeanor. That being said, they can still spend up to 90 days in detention or 120 if they're over the age of 16. They can be put on probation for extensive periods of time that ultimately the parents end up paying for. There's a whole bunch of therapies and rehabilitative treatments and stuff that gets put in place when they're engaging in these activities and don't, and it's necessary to stop it. The other thing that happens is we'll get the child pornography cases where it's not the boyfriend-girlfriend scenario. You'll get the girl who sends it to the boy and the boy who sends it on to the other kids. That leaves that realm of the indecent display of youth and becomes child pornography at that point. And those are usually the ones that get brought to our attention as opposed to just the boyfriend-girlfriend sending pictures to each other, which is still a crime. It's just not as high of a level of a crime. Does that make sense?
What constitutes child pornography? What in the picture? What is that?
Exposed genitalia, breasts on girls, sexual acts. We've had videos sent around of sex, of oral sex, things like that get shared. Things of that nature.
Okay. So,
am I missing something?
No, that's it. That's anybody under in Indiana. There's a lot of confusion that age 16 is the age of consent, but anybody under the age of 18 is still considered a minor when it comes to child pornography. So a 17-year-old, a picture of a 17-year-old is still child pornography. Even though in Indiana she could consent to have sex, she cannot consent to have her picture taken. So anybody under the age of 18 who is displaying their genitalia or sexual acts, that is child pornography.
Anybody in that whole sharing that's over 18 or 18 or over, would they be like put on the registry then? Like,
it's case by case scenario. Anybody over the age of 18 is an adult, and so therefore, unlike the juvenile system that Alex has been describing, they are now in the adult system. So if in fact it met the elements of the crime and charges were filed, they would face possible registration.
I think the thing also, I would really stress seniors. We have a lot of seniors that are 18 and 19 that for 13 years have gone to school with all these kids. But when they become an 18-year-old, life changes. And if I'm going to date that 16-year-old, we've been talking for a while. They were a freshman, now she's a sophomore, and I'm a senior, and I turned 18. It could significantly change your life a great deal. And you can Google stories. You see kids, mostly boys, that did that. Got pictures of girls, got put on, the sex offender, and for 10 years have to report. I believe it's 10 years, correct? There's a case up in northern Indiana where a boy thought, what's the big deal? Well, he was on for the next 10 years, and he wanted to be a teacher. He'll never be a teacher. It will be very difficult for a school to ever say, yeah, we understand you were 17 and 16 at the time or whatever. So really want to stress to the seniors at our high school, but also in all high schools, you need to really understand there is the line.
If you're a student and you get that picture, what is your or your parents' next steps? Because instinctually it's like, oh, delete it or send it to me and I'll take it in, but you clearly don't want it on your phone either. So
send it to me is never the option.
Right.
Never say send it to me. It doesn't matter if obviously that's an innocent intent.
Right.
But the police are still going to investigate if it's found on your phone.
So if that happens, what does the student and or parent do next? If they get it on their phone and they're like, ooh.
It's a hard question because obviously you don't want to involve your kids in that. I think as a parent, our instinct is to protect. Delete is what a parent would do. From our standpoint, with the intent to help curb the behavior, correct the behavior, and that's what the juvenile system is for, the best thing to do is confiscate your child's phone, turn it off, because your kids will know how to delete that stuff remotely. Turn it off and contact the police. It doesn't mean your kid's necessarily going to get in trouble, but it's going you don't know how large that is. There were sexting rings that have recently been up north. Not talking about the Plainfield stuff here as that is ongoing, but there's other schools where these have happened, where it has been on such a large scale that hundreds of students were involved when they finally got to the bottom of it. And you don't want your kids to be subject to that, because typically what happens, and this goes back into the cyberbullying, there's a few of them that are the ringleaders that coax all these others in, and then they control the others because I have something over you now, and they'll end up getting more, and it gets worse, and it gets more perverse, and it's dangerous. So I would encourage you to contact the police. It's a hard choice to make because clearly you're telling the police, my child has something in his possession he should not have.
From the school side, once we see it, that's all we need. You're going to get in trouble. You have broken the school policy, and we'll deal with it at that point. But we're not, at that point in time, we're then going to call Chief O'Sullivan or someone from his department and turn it over to them. We're not going to start looking at it. We're not going to, we may ask if they did send it on because there's other kids, but we're not going to go searching every kid's phone in that classroom to see if it happened. But if we do see a picture, that's going to trigger that person's in trouble, and we'll have pause and move on. We had a situation at the middle school right before spring break where cell phone went off. There was a picture on the screen. The school dealt with it right then. Didn't do anything after that, then turned it over to the police and said, okay, we'll let them investigate. And that's going to be our response. And we're going to leave it to legal experts to do their job.
We all have dual roles here, but you have to make a decision as a parent what you're going to tell your kids to do. I guarantee you, your high school is going to get a picture. It's happening that often. As a parent, not as a lawyer, I've threatened my child's life and said if he receives one, as soon as he receives it, he's to shut the phone off, not tell anyone he has it, and not to turn the phone back on again until he gets to me. Now that's because I'm a lawyer and I know what to do, and I'm a control freak mom. I don't know that that's the right advice, and the school's probably not going to tell you the same thing, but as a parent, I don't want him sharing that. I don't want someone else seeing it. I don't want him passing it on. But I'm not, as a prosecutor, I'm not convinced I want him to delete it, because I kind of want to know what's going on out there and who's sending these. And if he just shuts his phone off, then I might be able to figure out what's going on. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm not telling you to tell your kids that. But it's all part of what we do is very gray. There's not a black and white answer to anything we do on a daily basis. I screened a bunch of stuff last year, a bunch of boys, and they're not necessarily from this school. We cover the entire county, so don't. But they were messing around in the school, just like all teasing each other. When we were little kids, mooning each other, that was ha-ha funny. They were dropping their drawers and taking pictures of each other and laughing, and you could tell the spirit of it was that they were joking around, but they were naked pictures. So we have to be aware that it's not always someone sending naked pictures to someone else for sexual purposes. Sometimes it's just pure inappropriate stupidity. So we got to talk to our kids about that kind of stuff too. That's just not funny. They might have thought it was, but it's not.
I want to touch on two things real quick. One, the majority of the cases that I get, parents are very, very much unaware of what their kid is doing. Obviously so, but it usually comes as a shock and a surprise, especially when their kid is sending stuff to adults as opposed to just other juveniles. When I was in school, I did some stuff with the state police, and they came in and showed that in Indiana alone, there's typically about 10,000 different devices and computers and things that are downloading child pornography annually. Obviously, we go after it and prosecute as many of those as we can, but the number was between 9,000 and 10,000. So that being the case, when these pictures get out, they don't go away typically. These people hold on to them for decades if they can, and indefinitely they collect them. And so once these pictures get out and are sent around and get out into the rest of the world, they're going to be kept by a lot of people and for a very, very long time. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quickly is what you're supposed to do as a parent. I don't want you to think that from our perspective that if you tell us that your kid has something on their phone, that we have discretion. If you bring it to our attention or you turn it to the police and you're a witness as opposed to somebody who's doing bad things, don't assume that we automatically punish everybody who reports something. That's not the scenario. You very well might be an innocent victim, or your kid might be who's being sent things, and that's an entirely different scenario than the kids who are taking and sending the pictures or passing them on. If that makes sense, I just didn't want that to be left in the air that if you get something on your kid's phone, we're automatically looking to punish them. That's not the case. Most of the time, the stuff that's brought to us are by kids who are concerned by what they see, or are turned into the school or the police, and they bring it to us because they're concerned. Does that make any sense on that part of it?
Quick question for the 3D. If a student gets their picture and they start passing their phone around, did they also just distribute it? Even though they say on one phone, I hand it to Ryan, and then hands it.
That is still distribution, yes.
And from the school's perspective, everyone that touched it is now in trouble. That's how we look at it. So we'll have parents that probably get mad at us, say, well, Ryan's mom and dad come and say, hey, Ryan just passed it on. He didn't really look. Doesn't matter. You held it. You possessed it. Our handbook says if you have that and you possess it, you're going to get in trouble. And we want everybody to have a safe learning environment. So I want to make sure that's clear that distribution is not just emailing it to everybody. It's also just passing it on physically in that classroom, like going into all your buddies in the locker room and say, hey, look. That would also constitute from our side a major disruption, and we would deal with that very harshly. I just want to make that also clear that threats, if you threaten our school, you threaten our safety, we're going to deal with you to the full extent that we have available. What does that mean? That means you're going to be expelled from school. And Franklin Schools does not have an appeal policy. If our hearing officer deems credible and that the separation from school is going to exist, they'll be expelled. The only way to appeal is go to the courts. You have to go to the courts to try to get back in, and we will deal with that. We actually have dealt with that, and we work very closely. The next step for us is to reach out to the police department, and then we step aside. We're going to move forward with our due process from the standpoint of expulsion, and then we're going to turn it over to Franklin PD, and they're going to move forward with their investigation.
And just to reiterate, I don't know if everybody caught this, but we as school officials have a duty to report. And as soon as we have knowledge of those pictures or whatever it may be on that phone or electronic device, law says immediate notification of law enforcement or DCS. And that we are bound by that.
If it's on school property or anywhere.
Actually, for us, if we would ever learn something, like if someone comes to me at my church, whatever, I would still have a duty to report. And actually, every citizen has a duty to report, correct?
Yeah.
Schools has a high liability, but every citizen, is that correct?
In Indiana, there is a law that requires mandatory reporting for child abuse or sexual crimes to children. It's every citizen's responsibility, if that comes to your attention, to contact the police.
Schools just gets a little bit higher. So.
You've been raising your hand.
Yeah.
You might have answered it. You guys were speaking about the process if a picture was found on the phone. I wondered how it was similar or different if it was something like sexting that was found on the phone.
Just words.
Text.
Really, that's a case-by-case basis. It all depends on. It can be harassment if it wasn't wanted. If two people are doing that back and forth, there's not really anything we can do. It's a story that they're telling each other. It's not a violation of the law if there's not some physical picture that goes along with that story.
I think the educational awareness for that piece is what's next. It's worse than, as parents, we would be concerned about what else is happening, already happened, or what may be about to happen in that relationship.
In my experience as a prosecutor on the adult side, sexting will always end in pictures. It just will.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on that? Yep.
I do. This is a really broad question, comment, however you want to look at it. But Carrie, you mentioned it's gray. this guy on the video said, I didn't know anything was wrong. We're talking about everything's desensitized. We're all scratching our heads. Is the school taking any sort of steps towards teaching the kids or educating them? What are the consequences? What is the black and the white, so that they know?
It actually starts at a young age. If you go into our guidance programs, our guidance counselors are talking about, good touch, bad touch, what's appropriate, using cell phones at a young age, and then throughout we have a curriculum that we follow digital literacy. I will tell you, it's broad. It's probably very quick when it comes to that. Just had a conversation with Mr. Ahaus today about next year, and maybe looking to put it in for all 7th graders as a requirement. We're required by law in Indiana to present digital literacy and talk about safety. So we are doing that. The high school, you'll notice here on the picture poster, it says Think. Mrs. McCain had an advisor time or coach time where all the kids and all the teachers walk through what does Think mean about social media. So we are doing things to educate our kids from kindergarten through their senior year. But is it enough? That's why we're here today, is just to do one more step, to be proactive, tell the community, we need help. You are the best teacher, but we'll continue to provide some opportunities to do it.
And I do know at the middle school, Mr. Ahaus brought in the lady from the Department of Justice. She used to be a state police officer.
She's
is that right?
with the state police.
She's with us, okay. And did a similar presentation for our middle school students. And it wasn't necessarily surrounding the legal ramifications. It was more educational about the consequences, what to look for, what not to do, talking about apps and things like that, and how to be safe on the use of those. I do know that in health class here at the high school, they're doing similar things. And I know Brian Oliver, our SRO, has been in the classrooms trying to educate that. Need to do more,
Well, I only say that because I understand it starts at home, and it should. But we're talking about social issues here, and you guys have our kids for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. I see my kids a couple hours in the evening and then go to bed. So my concern is the technology evolves so quickly, I can't stay up with it. So it's almost like we're crying out for help from the schools because you're in front of them and probably know more about that than we do. So that's why I make the comments I do.
Yeah,
We appreciate that. And we're continuing to look ways to better reach the kids, have that consciousness. Unfortunately for a lot of boys, we all know that they're not fully developed in their mental thoughts, and they respond very quickly and they do dumb things. So even when we tell them, don't do this, a week later they may be doing it. We'll continue to do that, but I do appreciate acknowledging that we still need to consider and ponder it. And like I said, Steve today on an afternoon phone call, he said, I'm thinking about putting this in for all 7th graders next year. What do you think? So that's where we're headed.
And we provide those educational things, but we're bound by the search and seizure laws around that and Fourth Amendment, and so we can't physically go make sure they're not doing it. And we all know as parents they are, right?
I think just the education piece is the most important. Like you talked about the lady from the Department of Justice came.
Mm-hmm.
Our daughter is a girl of few words. You've got to pull things out of her. And the day that they had her there, that's like all she talked about. She was like, I didn't know this, and I didn't, like, her eyes were like this. So we talked about it, and I was like, oh, that really had a big impact on her. So I really appreciated that.
Kudos to the middle school administration for bringing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess my question would be, as a parent, we have to take that class and sign off when we get that Chromebook.
Yep.
And I just maybe if there was a way that the kid had to, because I think my concern is, obviously we're concerned parents who are here, but there's a lot of kids that take that Chromebook home and there's no one monitoring it. And I think if we're gonna give them that, and I agree, I think we do a great job of like starting out young when we talk about our counseling programs, but I have to sign off as a parent that you're gonna get it. So what are you signing off and saying, hey, I need to be aware that I could live my whole life with this Chromebook?
I think, don't high schoolers sign off too?
I I didn't know if there was-
everybody signs off. The director of technology is here today. One of the things that he's created is our web filter extends to your home.
Okay.
So when that kid gets on at home at 1 o'clock in the morning, Matt can see that, and actually we have designees in each building. Is that correct?
Building administrators.
And they will get notified immediately if a kid is going to a site that has words or a blocked site. And then it's a matter of then Matt gets to be our forensics guy to dig down a lot. And then if it becomes a criminal act, then Matt stops, turns it over. So we are trying to look at that. I do want to mention one thing we talked about. We have very good web filter here. When the kids come in with phones that connect immediately away from us, it's not on a filter. So they may be sitting in class, not doing our own device network and using their Verizon or AT&T network. That's not going to be filtered. That's the other reason why we need mom and dad, please check when they get home or once a week or something to reach out to do that.
So what kind of things are they doing? You said that the phone was a good tool. What kind of things are they doing using phones that they couldn't be using their phone for while they're in school?
Well, I know there are a couple different times where we've had kids away from each other, where they're actually doing stuff with their Chromebook and they're chatting back and forth on their phone. That'd be one example. They use their phones for some calculations in some classes as opposed to the Chromebook. I will tell you that the Chromebook, as wonderful it is, it doesn't have all the apps. It's coming. It's becoming an Android device this year, correct, Matt?
In 2017.
In 2017. So that's where you'll see the Chromebook not quite being up to the needs of the students. So they'll pull out their iPhones quickly because it's also a little easier for them to use. So that's what's taking place.
All right, well, a couple last slides here. Helpful tips and parent resources. Really covered these bullet points here. The things that are underlined, those are the things that we as parents need to be cognizant of. Checking your child's electronic device frequently. Passwords, know what those passwords are. If you don't know, ask and take the phone from them. Those types of things. New apps, I don't even know how to start a list, right? And that's up for us. I think Matt may have that as a resource. But where to go find out where that kind of stuff is down here. There's ICAC and DHS. Those are resources for you to go out there and start looking and seeing what's out there. And then chatting with your kids. This is a resource. This is a short little video, and then we'll wrap it up with any final questions and comments from you all. This is a resource that Melissa McCain brought to us. Some pamphlets in the back that go along with this little video that you're about to watch. It's a very good resource for you, and it's how to start the conversation with your kids. Okay, we'll just watch this, and then we'll start to wrap it up.
The internet. It offers enormous opportunities to communicate. Most of us, including kids, do all kinds of things online. We connect through email, text, and instant messaging. We post and distribute pictures and videos. We may have profiles on social networks where we share our lives, our plans, and our thoughts with hundreds of people. These ways of communicating and socializing can be convenient and fun, yet they come with certain risks. Many parents wonder, how should I talk to my kids about being safe online? A booklet called NetCetera provides some practical tips.
That's in the
It's
back.
based on the idea that the first step to protecting kids online is more about talking than technology. When kids want important information, they turn to their parents. So talk to them about your values, honesty, fairness, courtesy, or whatever values are most important in your family, and how they apply in an online setting. By communicating your values and expectations, you'll help your kids make smarter, more thoughtful decisions when they face tricky situations online. Here are some things to talk about. Social networking sites, chat rooms, and blogs are some ways kids socialize online. They can help kids connect with friends, but it's important to help your children learn how to navigate these spaces safely. Among the pitfalls, sharing too much information and posting pictures or video that can hurt someone's feelings or damage a reputation. Talk to your kids about applying good judgment to help minimize those pitfalls. Most mobile phones have cameras and can shoot video, making it easy for teens to capture and share every moment on the go. Encourage kids to think about their privacy and that of others before they share photos and videos. Cyberbullying is bullying that happens online, and it's a lose-lose proposition. It makes the person being harassed feel bad, and it makes the bully look bad. Talk to your kids about treating others with respect, and let them know they can talk to you if someone harasses them. If that happens, encourage your kids to block the bully if they can, and ignore him or her if they can't. That's because bullies are looking for a reaction. If it continues, ask your kids to save the evidence and share it with you or another adult they trust. Mean behavior usually stops pretty quickly when someone speaks up. Encourage your kids to stand up for themselves and to stand up for someone else being cyberbullied. And talk to your kids about treating others online the same way they want to be treated. Here are some other tips to keep in mind. Start early. Young kids see their parents using smartphones and computers, so as soon as your kids use one themselves, it's time to talk to them about safety. Initiate conversations. Don't wait for kids to come to you. Use everyday chances to talk with them. News stories about cyberbullying, a storyline on TV, both can be the start of a good conversation. Be patient. Most kids need small bits of information, repeated often for it to really sink in. Keep talking. Chances are it'll pay off. Read NetCetera for more information about chatting with your kids about being safe online. It's free, and you'll find it at onguardonline.gov.
Okay, thanks, Melissa, for bringing those to us, and be sure to grab one of those booklets on your way out this evening. Just to wrap it up, we had one other question come in. I'm not sure what's still playing in the background. There it is. Sorry. We had one other question come in. Has FCS provided similar educational forums like this for our students? I think we covered that. I don't know if that was your question or not. We did, and we'll continue to do that. Robin, do we have any other questions that have come in this evening? Okay, all right. Any other topics, questions, comments that we want to talk about while we're here, while you have this panel?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Since this is a partnership between schools, community, and parents, you guys, I'm sure, you especially, probably know of every bad site that's ever been out there. Can we get educated as parents from the schools? Here are signs to look for, here are sites to look for. Because when you mentioned the calculator, never heard of that in my life.
Yeah.
I never would have known to look for something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's legal.
I don't know where we.
I mean, I know it's going to be a continuous.
The problem is I mean, there is new stuff all the time. This list, I actually had a list when we were preparing for this. Some news media outlets have created lists, and so for this today, we were contacted, and they wanted us to share that. Well, last night and today, I went through that list. I had probably 30 apps on that list. They're all gone. I haven't been keeping up on that, just because most of the information I get is when I get a new case, I look at it, oh, I need to check into that.
They're just here and gone so quickly.
That fast. And really what it is if you get online and Google, one of the things I did, just get online, and what I Googled was top apps to hide things from parents. And I got a list of 10. Now, I'm an iPhone user. Some of those apps were Android, and so I couldn't look at them. I don't know what they are, but I Googled them, and I got a brief explanation of what they are. If they were Android apps, I couldn't check to see if they actually are, if they are still available or not. A lot of those disappear. A lot of that is up to us as parents, because like I said, if you're looking at your kid's phone and there's an app they don't want to tell you about, you just delete it. Those apps are going to disappear because if people aren't downloading them, it's going to be replaced by something else. But we are kind of in charge of that.
Melissa?
As a media specialist, I completely agree. There's nothing that's going to tell you all the bad stuff out there. You just have to be aware. But there is a site called Common Sense Media, and you know how like with movies, you can go in and see why it's rated a certain way. They do the same thing with apps, so it's a good place to start. But you definitely just need to be involved.
I think one thing we could also provide something on our website that would be built for parent help and just list it, be as current as possible. And do that. Common Sense Media is a great example. Just have that link there. So right.
One of the problems with creating a website, and we've discussed it at the prosecutor's office, put on our site, is if we are providing a link where you as parents can get in and look, we're also providing that link for kids to get in and look. As soon as the kids learn that, hey, there's this site the prosecutor's office has that shows you all the bad websites, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to start clicking on the bad websites, and what we have done is facilitated that. So it's a very tricky issue. How do we keep parents up to date and involved without promulgating the entire issue and making it worse ourselves? So it's a difficult question. I think everybody here would love to be able to say, here's a list. Don't let your kids see this. But we just know that's not possible.
My whole thought around it is apps like that typically catch fire. And when it catches fire within a school, it's going to be on everybody's phone in a matter of days.
And I think that's earlier I said, look on your kid's phone. If there's something that looks questionable, ask them. Or even if it doesn't look questionable, sit down one night and say, okay, we're going on your phone. Well, Dad, I've got 170 apps here. Well, pick which ones are most important to you because we're deleting the rest. And make them talk to you about what those apps do. And again, you said, I understand, you said your daughter's a woman of few words.
Yeah.
My son gets like pulling teeth sometimes, but you know what? It's mine. You don't want to talk about it, give it back.
Okay. Good questions, good comments. I'm going to let each panelist just have a final word, and then we'll wrap it up. Gary, your one big takeaway, whatever you want, the audience maybe watching later.
I don't.
Big takeaway.
Well, I promised my son I wouldn't say what I was thinking, but you might tell your kids that you don't want another student's mom to be looking at them when she's going to work every day. Something to cause them to have their eyes get big and go, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Just be nosy, keep your nose in it, talk to their friends, talk to your friends, your adult friends who are also parents. I found out about the calculator app because of Ryan. My son's in pre-calculus. He has all kinds of math stuff on his phone that I don't understand. Guess what? We clicked on all of that after I found out about the calculator app. But I wouldn't have known about that. I just talked to people.
I agree. Like I said, most of the parents that I deal with that are involved, that have kids that end up getting in trouble, are very unaware of what's going on. Even if your kid isn't involved directly, they usually know somebody that is, or know something that's going on, and they can be a very useful resource for protecting other kids. Even if they're not the ones who are involved, they typically know that it's happening and know who's involved and know a heck of a lot more than you probably think they do.
I said a lot, so I'll just keep it to 2 words. Communicate and passwords. Ask them for their passwords and do your best to talk to them about the stuff that they have on their phones.
I'll go last just to say thank you.
I'll say, as a parent, I've told my kids, whatever you post, think of that as it could be on the front page of the paper or on the news. If you're not embarrassed by it then it's probably going to be acceptable. And as a police officer, I'll say we value our partnership with the schools because one of our main goals is the safety of our students and our community, and that's why we're working together to create new programs and constantly be out there to keep the school and the students safe.
Speaking as an SRO, I just want you guys to know, if there's something on your kid's phone, have them come tell us. Yes, you may get a slap on the wrist, or you may get in a little bit of trouble, but it's better to come forward and share it with us what you found than to have us coming to you saying, hey, we found this, linked back to your phone. So just reiterate to your children, have them come to us, report to either myself or one of the administrators, and we'll try to take it from there.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank the prosecutor's office for giving up 90 minutes of their night to come and share the legal side and from the police department. We have great partnerships. I think one thing that Franklin's very proud of is that all the agencies work really hard for one reason, and that's so that our kids can have great lives. You know, we have a guiding principle of individual student growth, and that's the most important thing for us. Safety falls in that, partnerships to help the kids fall into that, and the whole social media, cyber stuff can be great in many ways, but the bad side can way outweigh all the great things for a 10-second event that you think, what's the big deal? It is a huge deal. So parents, please continue to partner, share, call one of us if you have a question. You're not going to get in trouble. We're here to listen. We're here to help partner and make sure that Franklin continues to be a great city and a great place to learn, grow, and live.
Well said.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks for being here.